Hello, and welcome to today's Saratech enablement session. My name is Andrea Hall, and I am the Customer Relationship Manager at Saratech, and I will be your host today. Presenting today, we are lucky enough to have two presenters. We have Andy Haynes and Al Robertson, both from the Siemens FEMAP development team, and they will be talking to you today about some of the questions that were asked ahead of time from you, our customers. Next slide. Just to let you know a little bit more about our Saratech enablement sessions, I think it might be paused, Andy. So you might want to unpause that and then switch over to the next slide. Our sessions run about 30 minutes each, and they are all recorded and posted to our Saratech YouTube channel. Just make sure you check out our past sessions there. A lot of your questions might be answered in some past sessions. We do have quite a bit of FEMAP sessions because that is seems to be what's most requested. We do meet here twice a month, and the point of these sessions are just to learn about tips and tricks and new and old features that can help you in your everyday tasks. This is an open forum. Normally we just leave it open. You can ask your questions over in the questions tab over on the right. And I will gladly interrupt the presenter and just let them know about your questions. Today's session obviously has been prepared based around questions that have already been asked ahead of time, but if you have questions as we go along about what is happening during these presentations, then please go ahead and type your questions over on the right, and we will do our best to get those answered right away. And with that, I am going to pass the baton over to Andy.
All right, thank you very much, Andrea. Hey, this is who's going to be presenting today. I'm Andy Haynes, manager of the FEMAP Applications Engineering team. I've been working with FEMAP since 1998 in development, so I've been here a long time. I've heard a lot of questions, answered a lot of questions, etc. Al, you want to go?
Yes, thanks, Andy. Yes, I'm Al Robertson. I look after FEMAP marketing and actually FEMAP product management now as well. And I too have been involved in the product for a number of years, both in this company and a prior company before that. So yeah, it's primarily Andy that's going to be presenting, but I'm be glad to be here. And if there are any questions that pertain to my input, I'll be glad to provide that. So okay, Andy, back to you.
All right, great. All right, so we got a number of questions. I think we got 10 or 12 overall, so we're just going to kind of go through them one at a time. So the question was how do you set up a startup command file, a session preference? I hope most of you have found out by now that you can go to the file preferences command, and there's a number of tabs on there that control different aspects of the FEMAP application. Those preferences are then saved in what we call the FEMAP.ini file, or an initialization file. So when you start FEMAP, or when you save any of these preferences, your preferences are saved to the FEMAP.ini file. And that's typically stored in the same directory as the FEMAP.exe. Our current version of FEMAP is version 12.0.1. And what you can do if you've moved from an older version of FEMAP to a newer version, you basically just want all of your preferences to come with it. One of the things that you can do is you can just take the FEMAP.ini file and bring that from a previous version over into your new version. There might be one or two things that are new that you want to set. Again, you can then just go to File Preferences and do that. Now, I also thought what this question might have been about was actually kind of setting up a bunch of things in the view, whether it's your background color, your element colors, etc. So what you can actually do is you can get your view set up exactly as you want it, and then save that to the view library. Then you can specify what we call a startup view on the Views tab of File Preferences. And you're going to see the dialog boxes in a little bit after I explain one more thing about this. It's also possible to create either an API script. So FEMAP has a full API scripting language, applications programming interface, where we actually give you kind of the keys to the car, to the code actually, where you can basically code using calls that we have created to access specific functionality in FEMAP. The other thing that we can do, which is not quite as robust, but if you're just setting some simple things, maybe 5, 6 simple things, you can actually record a program file in FEMAP. So then what you can do is on the library startup tab of file preferences, you can point towards that program file or API script file, whichever one you might want to do. And then every time, and then there's an option to run it every time you start up FEMAP overall, or you can even make it happen that it's going to run that program script, that program file or API script every time a new model is created in FEMAP. So basically, if you're in the file preferences dialog box, you can see over there in the startup, like on the views tab, that's where you would set your startup view. If you want to click the 3 little buttons, that'll just allow you to browse and actually pick a view from your library. So you can do that. And then over here in the library startup tab, down in program, that's where you can specify your path to this startup script, startup program file, and whether you want to run it for every new model or not. But just again, just in general, all of these things can be used to specify some startup and the way FEMAP will behave in general. Okay. So someone had a question about API commands be provided in the API documentation. Now, we certainly do document a lot of them in the API programming manual. Could we add some more? Of course, and we will try to do that, especially as we add new things to it. Typically, when we put an example into the API programming manual, it's because maybe there's something that's not quite obvious about the way to use it. Thus, that's why we feel like it needs to have, a little code snippet, basically something that you can just copy out of the documentation and bring it over into the API programming window or another programming thing like Visual Basic for applications, or just something like Visual Studio, and you basically just have a working code snippet. Now, the other thing that we do include, though, is that we have an API folder that we install. You're going to find it in the FEMAP installation directory, which contains a number of scripts, pre-written API scripts, and we actually have those all documented in a file called customtools.pdf. That's in the PDF directory, again, also in your FEMAP installation directory. So you can go in there and you can actually kind of find out what every one of the API scripts that we ship does for you. And then the code for those API scripts, again, is in the various directories underneath the main API directory in your FEMAP installation folder. So again, that's going to be some pretty helpful information for some of you, especially if you're just getting started with the API. I don't have it on here, but there's also, if anybody wants it, I can send out something that we have. It's almost like a primer for using the FEMAP API, because the API manual itself is well over 2,000 pages and it's more of a reference manual, just telling you about each call or each object, and only has a little bit about actually writing the code. One last thing about this one is many FEMAP users post API scripts to the FEMAP online user community, which can be accessed using the help FEMAP user community command inside the program. So basically, you just go in there and go up there, and even sometimes if you just post that you're looking for an API script that does something either very general or very specific, a lot of times our other users will answer, or someone here in development or GTAC will answer as well, directly from Siemens or one of the partners, so like Saratech. All right, this question is about grouping. Can there be a switch that allows FEMAP to go from being like an ID-only list approach, which is working as designed, to something more of an internal reference list that doesn't cause the elements and that needs to migrate around? I mean, part of the reason we do groups this way is so you could set up your groups ahead of time, because a lot of analysts use just sections of IDs for certain portions of their structure. So essentially what you can do is you could just say that you wanted to put in from, say, IDs 1 to 10,000, and that's just going to be this one section of your model. So you can actually have those in your groups, whether they're element IDs or they're node IDs from beforehand, and then as you create these entities inside FEMAP, they'll already be in these predefined groups that you have. Now, we understand that this might not be the way that everybody works. So what we're going to do is we're going to investigate this a little bit more for future release. And the one thing that we're really investigating is the possibility of creating commands or methods which would essentially purge non-existent entities from groups. They would still work the same, but if you use this purge command, essentially what you would end up doing is just, it would go through, and if the entities were no longer there, because typically what happens is that the entities somehow were deleted or the IDs were updated for some reason. So if you were just able to purge non-existing entities from the groups, we believe that this would go a long way into helping folks who have this problem where basically a lot of times they can end up with some of the wrong stuff in a group accidentally. This is another question we had here. When is Siemens going to develop a robust hex dominant mesh generator that can create hex elements and basically create hexes on elements and then kind of do locations of interest as well as throughout the volume? Well, as of right now, we currently have no plans to create a generalized hybrid mesher. But what we did do for version 2019.1 was we added the ability to automatically create pyramid elements between solids, which are hex meshed, and solids, which are tet meshed. So previously, you would have had, if you wanted to make that transition, you would have had to kind of make those pyramids manually. But we actually just added an option to be able to choose where you want pyramids. We're going to automatically detect where we're going to create pyramids. Then we're going to automatically create those pyramids. So that's in 2019.1, which is scheduled for release in Q2 of 2019. So the April to June timeframe, probably April. This was just another one. Some of these are a little bit more complicated than others. This one, I think, is just, I don't know if someone was not able to find this command, but that's fine. It's just asking, is it possible for FEMAP to remember the folder location of each FEMAP model and being worked on simultaneously and save it? So I just gave this a try. And yeah, if I have 3 different models open simultaneously, then I use the file save all command. It saved each model to the correct location with the most recent version of that model. And I just put in a caveat there. If you have a situation, whoever asked this question, where this is not working for some reason, please let us know, and we will certainly take a look. Okay. Just another one here. When creating second order elements, parabolic elements, the side nodes don't touch the periphery of the geometry, but instead is directly between the corner nodes. So this is just something that you can do in FEMAP. By default, we have a lot of the more esoteric and not as commonly used options hidden from the user. So we actually, when we go into the Auto Mesh Surfaces dialog box, you can click More Options. There's an option to enable the mid-side nodes, and also there's another one to move it to geometry. These are both in the node options section. So if you just go in there and turn those 2 things on, the mid-side nodes will be projected onto the geometry onto the surface geometry that you're meshing. Now, that's not always the best idea because that can give you some pretty warped elements and kind of out of plane, and at some point they're really not working quite as well. when they're distorted like that. So if you want to limit the distortion of the element, you can. There's also another option that you can enable called max distortion angle, and then you just enter an appropriate value. I believe the default value is 10. So if it's 10 degrees, if it's going to cause it to become more than 10 degrees out of plane, it's not going to do it. But again, you can change that to whatever you want, especially if you just really need those nodes to be on that surface geometry. Okay, somebody wanted to know if we have the ability to create right 90-degree tri-elements, essentially, a split rectangle for use in the curved areas. Again, this is this is something that is not maybe used by everybody every day. So again, this is where you go into the AutoMesh surfaces, you click on more options, you set the mesher to try, and then there's actually an option on there called split quad map in the map meshing options section. And there's also some different angle measurements that you can do in there to get some different to get some different outcomes from the mesher. Another thing that I don't have on here, but just I wanted to say is we actually have what's called mesh approaches on surfaces. So you could do like a 4-corner mesh, you can do a 3-corner mesh. You can essentially just kind of force FEMAP to try to use just 3 corners or 4 corners of any number of cornered surface to get a better, just to get a better mapped mesh on that surface. I'm going to do a little bit of a demo later just to show you some of the various meshing tools. So again, we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. Okay, so here we had like a more interactive mesh editing options. This one was a little, I think I understood. You basically wanted to move a group of nodes by selecting 2 nodes that are spread far apart, and then having the nearby in between nodes project onto an imaginary line between 2 selected nodes. The way we can do this in FEMAP currently, which might not be quite as easy as what the customer was asking here, is we do have a modify project node command. What you would have to do is you'd have to select all the nodes you want to project. Then in the project onto, you can set that to vector. Then you just set the snap node to snap, the snap mode to snap to node, and then you can just pick those 2 nodes at the extent, and that's gonna effectively give us a vector that we can project those nodes onto. And again, if you're looking for different behavior, just please let us know. Okay, so questions 9 and 10 sort of go hand in hand, even though it may not sound like they're they're that alike, but they are, just because I'm going to explain it on the next slide here. So being able to set element quality parameters for which the auto mesher would attempt to stay within versus going back to manually adjust the mesh after running the auto mesher. And then having an option to create a quad only mesh versus just quad dominant mesh, which we have with our max quads option. So right now in FEMAP, the mesh size set on each curve is not flexible. So if it says it's going to put 6 elements along that curve, then 6 elements will be placed on that curve. In order to make some of the things mentioned on the previous slide possible, the mesh size on curves would need to be flexible and automatically increase or decrease when needed. Now, we've certainly talked about this a lot, and we certainly want to be able to do some of this stuff, but we also have to make sure this would be a fundamental change to how FEMAP has always worked. So we really want to make sure we wouldn't be interfering with any current, workflows of customers who really rely on the mesh size not being flexible. So essentially, you would have, if it's going to be 6, it has to be 6 on that curve, etc. But again, it's certainly something we've talked about a lot around here, and it's maybe we could do something where we would be able to say when you're sizing that, hey, we're going to be a little bit flexible here, and we could then do some different sizing to kind of almost ensure that we were going to get all quads. Because a lot of times when we mesh surfaces with our max quads option, we end up with 1. triangle in there. And then if you just change the mesh size on any curve, it all evens out, and then we get all quadrilaterals. Okay. Someone was dealing with highly contoured surfaces, and he wanted to know if we could create better defeaturing tools, especially for surface fillets, and that this would take care of most issues using the tool to mesh complex geometry. Okay, so we actually have a couple of different ways to approach this. In the meshing toolbox, we have a feature removal tool, and one of our feature types is blends. A blend is a fillet, essentially. So you can just click on a piece of geometry, whether it's a solid or a sheet solid. A sheet solid is just a collection of surfaces all stitched together into a single body. So you can just try to use that to remove blends and fillets, and hopefully it'll take care of those. If you want to limit them so it only does ones under a certain size, you can certainly do that as well. That's just an option you can set while you're in that meshing toolbox. If you just kind of want to try some brute force, we actually have the geometry solid remove face command. I mean, this is the toolbox is using this, but as well, like in the background, but maybe just picking which ones you want to try to get rid of, especially if it can't get rid of some, but it can get rid of others. This could be, you might be better off just trying iteratively to remove some faces. And we also have something that's kind of a little different. We have a command called mesh geometry preparation, which will attempt to defeature the geometry using a number of approaches. Some of the things it does is it automatically creates combined curves and boundary surfaces. It suppresses features. It creates splits in the geometry where appropriate. It can actually remove points. It does a number of things. Now you can link the amount of mesh, like of geometry preparation, to the mesh size. You can have it prepare you can raise the preparation size, so it's gonna find more and more features to try to remove or defeature a little bit, and then size it with something smaller if you like. So there's a lot of options in here, honestly. So just it's again, just maybe give it a try. And I'm just going to do this one more. Does FEMAP have similar mesh tools that maybe we are not aware of, or that FEMAP plans to incorporate soon? Well, I'll be honest, I was not entirely sure what similar means in this question. So I'm just going to demonstrate some tools in the meshing toolbox and some commands on the menu that we have. So I'm just going to go over in the FEMAP here. All right. So let's just say you have this bracket. One of the things that we're going to do is we're going to mid-surface this. It's going to do automatic. It's going to go get a distance from the model. I'm going to say I want to combine my mid-surfaces. All right. So now you can see that I have my original solid, and then I actually have a mid-surface of that, which is actually all combined into, even at the T-junctions, in what we call a non-manifold body. So I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to say I want to hide my surfaces of my original solid. And then I'm going to just kind of zoom in here. And I'm going to come over to our meshing toolbox. So I'm going to use geometry editing, and I'm going to use this project curve tool. And I'm going to imprint and extend with this. So what I can do here is I can now come here, and in my particular geometry here, I want to capture some of these differences in thickness. So I'm just going to come over here and do something similar. And just get that one as well. Now, one of the other things I could do, this has a lot of holes in it. I could get rid of these holes. So I could come in here and do feature removal and just get rid of some loops. I'll just get rid of a couple. So I'm just going to get rid of that. And in this case, I can also add a mesh point at the middle of my circle. So now I have a mesh point there. So it's going to be, so if I was just going to constrain this whole thing, essentially, I mean, all the nodes around this hole anyways, I now just have a mesh point there that I can do that with as well. All right, I'm gonna actually just turn off my geometry, and I'm just gonna come in here and do some mesh sizing. So mesh control, size on surface, on the solid. I'm just gonna use my default sizing. And then I'm just gonna mesh these surfaces with a dummy property for now. And you'll see why in a second. So I'm just gonna give it a thickness, choose a material, say okay, and get my model meshed. Okay. Now, if I were to turn my solid back on, and if I were to turn my thicknesses on anywhere, you can see that I basically have a single thickness here, which is not the best representation of this part. So what we actually did, I think this was in version either 11.2 or 11.3 of FEMAP, we added this command, which is modify, update elements, mid-surface thickness, and offset. So we can pick our mid-surface and we can just say, update the solid automatically. Let's do that. Do that. And what you can see if I turn my thicknesses off there, in certain places, it gave me offsets so I can get this, so I can kind of capture those various thicknesses in my model. And the offsets, and again, if I turn my thicknesses back on, you can see that it tends to follow the model pretty nicely. Okay, so those are just a couple of interesting tools, both in the meshing toolbox and our other command that allow you to do that. So let's say you have something like this where you've done some mid-surfacing of a part, but things just aren't lining up. We'll just start up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just come in here and I'm going to go to my geometry editing, and I can actually do this project move point. So I can just say I want to take this point and move it to that point. Actually, we're going to undo because we want to do it the other way. Actually, I want to take this point and we want to move this point to that point, this point, and then that point. Okay, so now those are all lined up. What I could do now is I'm going to project onto actually I'm going to extend, sorry, I'm going to extend onto a surface. So I'm going to say, I'm going to go to just onto surface. Now I can select the surface or I can go to single surface mode. I'm going to just do single surface mode for now. So I can pick a surface and then a curve to extend, surface, extend. Okay. Now what we also have here though is we actually have this surface auto curve. So in the case of this middle piece, what this is going to allow us to do is just pick a single one of these, like a surface, but then I'm going to just pick a single curve here, and you're going to see that it extended all of them for us. Just going to do that over here, and one more time. Now, along these same lines, I could just come here, and then instead of just picking them one at a time, I could actually pick just these individual curves. It's going to get all the ones in the center. It's going to project them all down. And now here's a real, I don't want to call it a trick, but something to really know about in FEMAP. And this is how we create what we call a non-manifold body or a general body. So we can come over here to geometry, surface, non-manifold add, and just pick these surfaces. And everywhere where you're seeing the yellow that came up, that's essentially showing you that that's a free edge. So when I go to mesh this, that's the only places where I'm going to get a free edge. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to size. And let's do something a little bit more than that, maybe. Let's do that. All right. And it doesn't matter. I'm just going to mesh it with plot only plates for now. And if I were to then take a look at my free edges, I can just go to view, select, or I can press the F5 key and I can just do free edges. And you can see that my model is fully connected and we should be all set to go with this geometry. All right. Now say we already had a mesh, an existing mesh. Now this mesh could be on geometry or it could be just orphan mesh. It could just be, there could be no geometry behind it. The nice part about the command I'm going to show you now is that if you use it and there is geometry, everything will become reassociated with that geometry after we're done. So we're going to go to mesh editing and we're going to do edge split. So we're just going to come out here and we're just going to pick these two and we're going to give some bias, 3 and then 2. Just going to say okay. So what this is actually going to do, I wasn't really showing you the whole model, is this actually just took that existing mesh on this kind of hollow fin and gave me, and subdivided that down into smaller elements with some biasing. So again, if you just need to do some work on an existing mesh, whether it has geometry or not, that's a great command. Again, that was mesh editing edge split. Now, one other one that we have here is we have mesh editing element refine. So I can choose which pattern I want, whether I want to break each quad in the 4 or in the 9. And then I could just come out here and I'm just going to say pick front. And I can just start dragging along to, make a finer mesh locally. Now, if I don't like that, nothing's happened so far. It's just been painted on. So I could just get rid of it. No skin off anybody's back. And we're all set to go. Now, there's also some additional functionality in here. You can say grow the refinement. So once you have it selected, you can grow it. I'm just going to say okay for now. If you just want to split some in particular, you could do something like this, where you would pick your elements, and then you just tell it a direction to split along. So then it's just going to do that. And again, it's just painted on yet. We can still just get rid of this, or we can say okay to update our mesh. We can also just have the split edges. So if you need a little bit more of a finer point on this, basically you can just have it split between, any two elements where there's an element edge. All right. So again, those are some of the nicer, just some of the nicer tools. A lot of some of those are a good bit newer to FEMAP. So if you haven't seen a demonstration in a while, or anything, or are still using an older version, maybe you don't have those. Maybe this might make you want to come over to FEMAP 12. Also notice, just talking about FEMAP 12, because I would imagine some of you don't have it. We did change, kind of just updated the look and feel. It did some things where you could now just close models by clicking on, the X here, and that sort of thing, almost like a browser. So just a little bit of a nice new functionality to make it a little bit more, up to date and modern. And we're going to continue to add these little pieces of functionality like that moving forward. Let me just change that. Swap my presenter slide. Also, I mentioned 2019.1 earlier. this is going to be coming out, again, we're hoping for April, but just wanted to go through some of the stuff that we've already added for 2019.1. Again, automatic creation of pyramid elements to transition between hex and TED elements, being able to extrude elements in both directions. We added a button just to pretty much every selection dialog box, which is just a select visible button. Previously, you would have had to kind of get all the entities that you want on your model, that you want to select on the screen, then do a box pick around it. Now you should just be able to, press this one button to get all this, all the visible entities, which is certainly a common used option in selection. Views, charts, and data series can now all be renumbered. And just one other little thing there, random colors for entities are now much more random. They used to repeat a lot more often. Now they're quite a bit more random and take advantage of our expanded palette. We also coming, it's a additional functionality for aero elastic flutter. So we're going to be able to now deform the aero grids. So the actual, you'll actually be able to correlate your aero panels with your structural model. Where we added our for version 12, that was our first release that supports the two NX Nastran multi-step solutions, whether they be multi-step structural solution 401 or multi-step nonlinear kinematic solution 402. So we just added a bunch more support for options in there for basically our second release. A good bit more support for NX Nastran solution 200, including topology optimization. So just so everybody knows, I think it was NX Nastran 11 or NX Nastran 12 added support for topology optimization. You basically have frozen regions or you have active regions, and you can kind of specify them all in FEMAP. You do need FEMAP 12 to do this, along with the optimization along with the manufacturing constraints and goals and objectives for your topology optimization or solution 200. So a lot more of that's going to be in there. And just sort of, again, so everybody knows, in version 12, we completely rewrote our ANSYS translator from scratch, from the ground up. So we're just going to continue to add support for ANSYS, new entity types, loading conditions, etc., with 2019.1. And that's sort of what I had for the prepared material. If anybody wants to ask a question, we probably have time to answer a few.
Yep, absolutely. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box over on the right-hand side. I can move on to the next couple of slides, and then if questions come in, we can always backtrack a little bit. Let's give people a couple of minutes here if you have questions. And if you're on today and you emailed us questions ahead of time, I hope that they were answered today. If you need further clarification, or if anything that Andy presented today kind of sparks any questions that you have, please feel free. You can email me directly at its first initial last name, so it's AHALL at saratech.com. If that's too hard to remember, you can email us at marketing@saratech.com as well. Either way, I will get the email, and we can always follow up with you. So thanks again, Andy. Great job today. And I think that this is something that's been really important for our customers to make sure that they are being heard by Siemens and by the FEMAP team. So we really appreciate your time and all of the preparation you put into today's session. Our next session is going to be on NX. So we're moving on to a different Siemens product for our next session. Our presenter is Chad Evans, one of our applications engineers. That will be in a couple of weeks on February 21st at the same time. So the emails will be going out for that shortly, and it is also posted on our website. So if you'd like to go ahead and register for that, you can do that there. And if you can't make it to the session, go ahead and register anyway, and we'll be sure to send out the replay for you. Next slide. And again, if you're ready to take it on to the next level, here at Saratech, we offer lots of other things other than just software. We have engineering services, training, and then we also have a wide variety of additive manufacturing options. So please let me know if you're interested in hearing any more about any of that. And I don't see any other questions that have come in. I think I did get one email, Andy, that I'll go ahead and send over to you. But thank you again, everyone, for attending today. If you'll just stick around for about 30 seconds after this, as soon as I close out this webinar, a little survey will pop up. If you'll just let us know how we did today, and also let us know if you have any suggestions for further customer enablement sessions. We do take those very seriously, and that's what we base our whole schedule around. Make sure that you follow us on all of our social media, and especially on YouTube, because that is where we have all of these videos. So we do post our CES sessions there, as well as shorter videos that are, you can kind of get sucked right into those, and they are really, really informative. And we really just base those around what our customers are calling into our support line about, and things that people are asking about. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, thank you everyone so much for joining, and I hope you all have a wonderful Thursday. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.